And so I think in order for explainability to just be baked into how we work, I think we need to do a better job of having a more diverse perspective in who the end user is and how to meet them where they are with how they like to learn and how they like to communicate. And that was the first thing that came up when you're asking about explainability. And then the second thing is that I think we need to have a little more humility or empathy for the vocabulary set that comes along with using technology. And that is no more apparent than right now with the AI wave, like I just mentioned, that's democratizing access to building with technology because we're opening up the doors to so many new people being able to create. And that's lovely and wonderful.
Welcome to ODSC's AIX podcast, your gateway to the latest in everything AI. Whether you're a seasoned AI expert or exploring how to bring AI into your work or career, we bring you insights from the best minds in the field. We host researchers, practitioners, and industry leaders shaping the future of AI and how it's being applied across research, product, and industry. This episode is sponsored by ODSC AI East, the premier AI Builders Conference, coming up this April 28th to 30th, 2026 in Boston and virtually. Learn more at odsc.ai/east and use the code podcast for an exclusive 10% discount. We're also bringing back the Agentic AI Summit, a virtual 3-week conference this January 21st to February 5th. Learn more at summit.ai. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of ODSC's AIX podcast. My name is Alex Landa, and I'm the head of content here at ODSC AI. And today we are speaking with Dr. Denise Gosnell. Denise is an award-winning computer scientist, startup advisor, and global expert in graph technologies. She earned her PhD in computer science from the Center of Intelligent Systems and Machine Learning at the University of Tennessee, where she built an in-memory graph database for telecom scale analytics. Denise is a top women leader in software as a service, holds multiple patents, including a recent Amazon Web Services patent on an enterprise scale AI engine. Seems like you've had a busy career. So Denise, what have I missed there that I'll let you say for yourself?
Alex, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to getting to be on this podcast for a bit since I started listening to you all. And it's humbling, right? To get to hear the pieces of your career that you've been involved in. So thank you so much for that intro. Most recently, which the ODSC team made a big splash for me at the conference in SF. And most recently, I just launched a book in September of 2025. And that was the book called Tech Confidential. It was my second book. The first one is an O'Reilly book that focuses on the main patterns of how enterprises around the world are using graph tech. That one's the Practitioner's Guide to Graph Data. But look, Alex, at the end of the day, I love writing. I love teaching and learning and sharing what I know. And that was one of the reasons why I was so stoked to get to talk with you today.
Well, it seems like you have a lot you can talk about, and you've had a lot of success in, well, a lot. You are not a top women leader for nothing, I'm sure.
Nope.
I was looking into your background. It was very easy to find your accomplishments. So that's what we like to see. So before we get into some of the more technical things, talking about graph databases and the sorts, I want to talk about your origin to a degree. So you earned your PhD in 2014 from the University of Tennessee. And that was, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
It feels like I'm not ready for it to be 2026.
Me neither.
I got my master's in 2016, and it's like, oh, that was a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah, no, time is flying way too fast.
It is terrifying. But just as I like to look back on my early writing from those eras, I'm wondering how do you look back on some of your early work, and does that still affect how you think about AI systems today? And what are some of the early things you learned that some of the tech industry is just now figuring out?
A great way to get started here, Alex. And looking back on, the past 11, 12 years since my PhD, the thing about AI systems that I think still shapes the industry today is that explainability matters. And when we were building with my dissertation, we were, doing large scale telecom analytics using graph databases. And really that work was all about which technique was going to be useful for predicting churn, which is when one person would, like leave Verizon, say, and like go to AT&T. That's all they really cared about. And you can imagine we threw the kitchen sink at it. We threw neural networks. We threw different types of decision tree models. I mean, we threw every type of data science model you can imagine at this problem. The graph model that we used, which did a simple neighborhood counting and comparison, it was just as accurate, slightly more accurate. But the reason that it became something that was worth acquiring for $50 million, another story, another time. But the reason that became the system that was acquired was because it was explainable. It was much easier to show the executives and to show the marketing directors how we were determining which cell phone numbers were leaving from this demographic and going to another demographic or going to another carrier, and how simple it was to explain the algorithm. So I do think that explainability matters. And I still believe that executives aren't very excited about probabilistic black boxes in production. So I think that's one piece that is still a part of how people ship production data science models today that I still see on all the deployments that I have a chance to work on. Biased though, I mainly work on graph deployments. So I feel very centered in the idea that explainability is really important. But I don't know, that's just me. And I guess when I think about that, Alex, you were kind of alluding that when you were talking about when we were talking about my accomplishments, and I just really wanted to jump in and say is that yes, there's a long track record of things that I've done, but I think the most important thing that I have done and that I know is the fact that I really don't know anything and that nobody knows everything. That is critical for being successful in the tech industry, because it isn't really about success. It's about being able to work in a team, and it's about being able to recognize the contributions that someone else on your team can make. And there's so many walls that are built by egos that prevent ideas from moving forward because people are just unable to work together because they believe they know everything. And that is something that has really stayed with me since my PhD. And have you ever XKCD comics? Is that a thing?
I love music.
Okay, all right. So I was like on a deep bender one day, deep into their reel, like back in my PhD, and that's where this nobody knows anything comes from. And I found my way over into something called PhD Comics. It's related to XKCD, and their comic was the World of Knowledge, and it like zoomed in on this like tiny blip, and it pointed at this tiny blip, and it was like, this is what you contribute when you are doing a PhD. And then when you zoom out, you realize that you can hardly even see that blip when you're looking at the whole circle, their whole world of knowledge. And I don't know, like in that moment, I realized that I was spending 4 to 6 years studying this one problem. How do you accurately predict when people change their cell phone number just from data? And if I spent 4 to 6 years trying to study that one problem, it's going to be really hard for me to assert that I know much else in another domain. So that's one thing that's really stuck with me since my PhD, and has been a part of how I really like to navigate the tech industry.
There are two things that really stuck out there for me. One is I love the acknowledgement that no one knows everything, because the best ideas come from curiosity. They come from chance by accident. I just love experimenting and being about things. And I think the most successful people I've met, whether through business or academia or arts, whatever, are the people that are just like, I want to know more things. So glad to hear that someone with your background sees it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I love that you mentioned curiosity too, Alex, because as soon as you go into the mode of who knows more than me or who knows the most, you get into a competitive stance that makes curiosity near impossible to find. So the way out of that competitive stance is to, like, if you ever find yourself saying, who knows the most in the room, or am I just as smart as them? the anecdote to that is curiosity. So the fact that you brought that up, I was like, that's brilliant, because that's how you keep that part of the culture from taking over how engineering is built.
And there's one other thing that I do have a follow-up question for. You mentioned explainability and how
Mhm.
even 10 years people in tech were looking for explainability. And just this morning, I helped someone post an article about explainability. And I'm wondering, it's been 10 years. So where is the issue that a lot of non-technical people, like, what is the concern there that they still seek explainability? Is it a cultural mindset? Is it managers who aren't equipped with that curiosity? Is it the fundamental concern that tech changes too quickly, especially in AI where things change every half a year? What would it take for explainability to just be more of an on-off switch as opposed to this whole process that we have to start from scratch every time?
Yeah. So two things are coming up for me on that, Alex. It's the two things are learning styles and then also the wall of vocabulary. So I think in order for explainability to just to be a part of, I guess to be part of our culture, so we don't have to call it out. I would think that the four main learning styles would have to be table stakes when you ship a product or when you go and create more developer advocacy content about how to use it, et cetera. You've got to make sure that you cover all four types of learners, visual learners, auditory learners. I come from an education background, so I like to think about this. And I also think that's the most exciting part about AI is because AI is opening up, um, it's just democratizing access to be able to build technology for people who are maybe more auditory processing learners, because now you have the capability of using your voice to create instruction sets, et cetera, and see where that goes with building. And so I think in order for explainability to just be baked into how we work, I think we need to do a better job of having a more diverse perspective in who the end user is and how to meet them where they are with how they like to learn and how they like to communicate. And that was the first thing that came up when you're asking about explainability. And then the second thing is that I think we need to have a little more humility or empathy for the vocabulary set that comes along with using technology. And that is no more apparent than right now with the AI wave, like I just mentioned, that's democratizing access to building with technology, because we're opening up the doors to so many new people being able to create. And that's lovely and wonderful. They also then get flooded with a tsunami of every acronym and tech word that we have been throwing out to explain whatever it is that we are building. And we just need to have some empathy for how hard it is to catch up, because it's a whole new world for them. So I think when it comes to explainability, those are the two aspects: building for a diverse set of learners and having empathy for the real vocabulary wave that we introduce to these people. I think those are two good places to start.
You say acronyms, and I find myself every single day having to Google, what does this acronym mean? Like,
Yes.
even for marketing things, I'm like, I use this tool. How do I not know what this is? Like, oh, there's a word for that thing?
Mm. It and my favorite hated acronym is LGMTFY. I don't like the "let me Google that for you" acronym. Yeah. It's like that one to me, I think amongst friends, there's always a place where it can be funny, it can be a joke, but I'll never forget being in Slack at like my first job as a data scientist. And I asked a question that I genuinely didn't know. And the response was the "let me Google that for you" acronym. And not only did I have to go look up that acronym, and then I felt like I got slapped in the face for not knowing something. And I think that I just think that we as a community can get it wrong a lot when you're trying to help someone new come into the fold and be a part of the cool stuff that we're building.
Okay. So we've talked a bit about some of your different roles coming from education or building things, being more on the business side of things. So what did each of these different roles teach you of how technical work actually succeeds or fails inside of these real applications and organizations?
Oh gosh, Alex, you have to meet your customer where they are. Full stop. I mean, like we kind of had already been talking about it just now. Like when you think about the new entrants into the AI wave, like being willing to meet them where they are and welcome them and show them how to come on into the community. It's the same thing when you're shipping code, shipping new data products. You really need to have a deep empathy of what it's like to be on the receiving end of that data product or of that prediction or the full application that you've just built, whatever it is, and fully understand how they're going to want to navigate it and how your customer is going to solve a problem in an easier, faster, better, more fun, I don't know, something positive. Just how your customer is going to solve a problem in a more positive way because they're using your tool. And I think that engineers and large organizations like to put a bunch of layers between the engineer building the thing and then the customer who's using it, so that you can hide and not have to talk to customers, and you can enjoy the difficulty of the technical problem that you're solving and feel pride in solving it. But that technical problem that you're solving has the same weight, if not more weight, than the problem you're trying to help another customer solve. And having real empathy to say, man, as a builder, I really, really am proud of myself for what I just solved and that hard problem I just solved. And then being able to translate that same empathy to your end user, your customer who's using your tool, solving a different problem. But to them, it's the same gravity. Like it's a major problem that you're helping them with. And to be able to have that and translate the empathy and pride you have when you solve hard problems to helping your customers solve those same hard problems, that is transcendent in every role, from being a chief data officer to doing product at Amazon to being a data scientist at a startup. It's always, it always comes down to making sure that you understand your customer and you deliver something that's going to delight them.
So what I'm hearing to a degree is keeping the people creating the product in a silo is not going to be the best approach.
It is not. It's not. And a lot of people push back against that because of things they like to make up. Like that person isn't going to be able to have communication skills to talk with customers. They have absolute empathy for solving hard problems. And there's definitely a way to find that path. I think sometimes people just don't want to do the hard work.
Because I think if I were to ask someone to build me a house from the ground up, sure, I'm going to want to talk to manager, architect, whatever. But then I'm also going to want to talk to some of the people doing the work. This way they understand what we really mean. Because blueprints and directions only go so far. And I'm sure architects do a great job of including everything. But if you know for sure, let's say I have a disability where I can't climb these stairs or something doesn't seem accessible or approachable, the one actually doing the building is going to look at that and say, okay, in theory, that looks great, but this person has an issue. So what can we do while I'm doing this to say, like, I'm putting these blocks right here and it's not working. So can we change it a bit? So does that kind of sound like how it would work in the realm of AI and shipping those kind of products?
I mean, absolutely. And as somebody with a disability myself, and having to modify different aspects of my home for the injury that I have, that's absolutely how it came together. Like you get the right people in the room to make the project happen, but then there's specifics at the end of the day that really only in that moment when you were building and really understanding the constraints of the environment that you're in, can you really make it work? So yes, and I think for where we are with the AI builders, I also can get out more and listen more. But when I have been out and listening, I sometimes feel like we're AI engineers building for other AI engineers. And I think we're missing a lot of the opportunity of democratizing the ability to build, democratizing the access to information and knowledge. And by definition, that is going to introduce larger groups of people to be able to join us. So I think sometimes it's like a race to the bottom, a race to be the person who still gets to stay in the cave and like build the most deepest part of the stack so that you can stay there and only talk to other AI engineers. But I just know that's not the only opportunity that's out there.
You've talked a little bit about your leadership in technology, and I'm wondering, what was the moment in your career when you realized that there is, in fact, no perfect plan and that the only operational model works in AI and data is what you call embrace the chaos?
Yes. Alex, I don't think there's a better moment than um, it was the day before I was launching an engine at reInvent at AWS. And we it started going off the rails, and we had to, within 24 hours of this launch being announced on the main stage by AWS, 24 hours before, we had to adjust which APIs were going to be available the next day, which meant that I had to comb through, I think, like 172 pages of our documentation and start separating which APIs were getting launched. And that was really just the beginning, because later that night, when we were deploying our engine to be available to the world, the deployment pipelines were breaking and got stuck. And I'm getting paged the day of the launch at 3 a.m., right before like I'm going into this basement to do a really big launch for AWS. And it's just, these were massive things at AWS scale that were breaking the moments before we were going on stage to announce this new engine. And there's nothing to do in that moment other than to first breathe, lean on the people around you, find a way to solve the problem, and calmly get it done. And we did. And, of course, the product the day of didn't go out the way that we had planned. But in that fashion, the team got together, we rallied around it, we made sure that we worked through to finish the launch, maybe not exactly on time on that day, but you can't plan for everything to be perfect, and it never does go that way. And you've got to be able to still be able to think clearly and flow in those most pressured moments, and still find a way to get to the other side.
I appreciate that mindset because nothing ever goes as planned. And I know that saying is so old and so worn out, but it's really true.
I It has depended on which team I was on. I think that the engineers and the team at AWS are some of the most world-class fire handlers that I've ever worked with. They're holding up the world's biggest cloud, and you can only imagine what it's like on the inside. And they're brilliant at it. But it's a skill that you learn in your career, because I know when I first started and I pushed a prod and pushed a bug and an API went down, I was not cool, calm, and collected. I was freaking out. Like, I just like broke an API in production as a data scientist, like a year out into my first job. And I can tell you that the amount of sweat that happened that day was minuscule compared to what it was like when I was going through AWS. But it's a learned skill. And I think that learned skill is only developed when you have empathy and strong collaboration with a team, and you work in a non-judgmental environment where failures are celebrated, experimentation is just a day in the life, and you learn by getting blessed by fire in our industry, and that's just how it's going to go.
Sometimes you just need to have those moments as learning experiences.
Absolutely. And you're going to have them, and you need to be prepared for them. And the only way to prepare is to know that when you're in it, you need to let go and just flow.
So we've talked about context a few times so far. And when you posted a couple of articles for us not long ago, you argued that AI performance depends on context rather than model size. So for practitioners, what does embracing a context-first mindset actually look like in real-time production systems? And why do graphs deliver context in a way that feature engineering and prompt tuning can't?
Your context first mindset in a production system when you're using AI is it needs to be grounded by some type of database, most likely data mesh, data. It just needs to be grounded by data that represents the business domain and its context. So there's going to be some type of work if you are building a new app, or maybe you are working for a company. You need to do the hard work to understand the translation layer between the questions being asked or the tasks and how it maps onto the business and the business's optimizations, what it cares about, the way that it generates revenue. That mapping has to exist. So make sure that you have a way that you are querying for the business's context in a database, et cetera, and make sure that's a part of the modeling and the way that your system is probabilistically determining the next step. And I I personally think that the most flexible way to do that is going to be with a graph model, because if you're thinking of in the moment generating different SQL queries or kicking off different workflows that hit certain APIs to get the business context, that's all predetermined, saying that this is the context. So it's almost like a recipe at that moment, right? Like we absolutely know that you need to take steps A, B, and C. But when you're using graphs, the very nature of how your schema is modeled creates a really flexible, dynamic configuration of how you're going to put pieces of data together. And when you bring together the right pieces of data, the context could not be what you were predicting. Yet the business is modeled that way. So I think graphs give you that flexibility to walk around, grab the context that's most relevant to that piece of data, and then bring it into the system. And so that's, I don't know, when you need to be grounding these models with data and flexibly grounding them, that's why I do think that graphs can give you some of the most accurate ways to do it. But that's where I really see a need for more context engineering within your AI models than maybe just going after bigger and better.
Does that connect back to our earlier points about understanding the customers and that kind of context?
I do think that when you're working with customers, that's going to be the first place that you're really going to want to bring context engineering into how you query for different types of customers. So that's the first place that you're going to look. So I'm glad you brought that up, because whenever you find a way to personalize a response according to the context of who's using the system, a personalized response is going to generate a much better outcome for the end user. That's going to make them more delighted and a better user of the system and overall. So I think that's a really great example for where context is going to make a much better way to apply your AI system.
Great. I mean, it seems like graphs, context, and people are all related. But speaking of graphs, one of your pieces of work, the Practitioner's Guide to Graph Data, in that you emphasize 4 graph patterns, which are neighborhoods, trees, paths, and recommendations. So which of these patterns do enterprises underuse the most today, and what measurable ROI are they missing by doing so?
This is a great topic, Alex. And I'm going to first answer which ones they're using a lot of. And recommendations all over the place for finding, recommending new friends on Snapchat or recommending new content on Netflix. Neighborhoods, like pattern matching, like, oh, I know that when you're connected to this and this credit card transaction happens, that's most likely fraud. Or when you are like representing a tree or just like a natural hierarchy of how things are organized and wanting to know like what's the root, or if you're at this level, like what are all the downward dependencies. And I think that neighborhoods, trees, and recommendations are most used because they're questions that we know, like we understand what we're asking and we understand the structure of the data that we're looking for when you use those 3 patterns. Paths, on the other hand, I don't see them used as much, because it's kind of like asking, I don't know how these 2 pieces are related and if they are at all, or what could be meaningful from it. So they don't use paths as much. But when you learn that 2 pieces of data can be connected, you might be able to provide a more personalized response than before, which as soon as you get into improving personalization, businesses know that there's going to be a much higher ROI on that end data product, because personalization is directly tied to having higher revenue, improved customer experiences, et cetera. And when you figure out that there could be 2 pieces of connected data about a person that you didn't know before, that absolutely is going to be able to help to increase your ROI. But I think it's the very nature of asking questions that are indeterminate or you're just asking, I don't know, can you tell me about what it's like between these two pieces of data? Because it's a more unsupervised question, if you don't mind me using that label a little bit liberally there, it feels like a more unsupervised question, so it's not used as much. But I think it's one of the secret weapons that graphs can provide.
Earlier on, we talked a bit about people not being in silos. And relating to that, you've also spoken about the tension between intuition and data, especially for AI teams under pressure. So how do you teach practitioners to combine their instincts with their graph evidence when deciding what to build next, when to pivot, and how to align cross-functional teams?
Yeah, Alex, I think we've even been talking about this same theme all over this podcast, which is that if you have real empathy for your customer and you truly understand the problems they're trying to solve, that's how you're going to build up your intuition, because your intuition comes into play when you need to prioritize, when you need to, come up with a design for a new feature, figure out a new way that a new user workflow. And when you have real empathy for your customer, your intuition is going to be able to guide you in those moments when you don't necessarily have data-driven evidence on how to do X or what piece to pick up next. So for that tension between your intuition and data, I think that's best solved in making sure that you really embody and understand who you're building for.
We've spoken a few times about all of these different pieces and what can happen when things don't always go right. So you've also described the chaos engine of Silicon Valley and the reality of engineering teams under pressure. So for our audience members listening to this who are machine learning engineers or even data leaders listening, what is a myth about high performance teams that they need to unlearn if they want AI systems to survive contact with the real world?
Oh my gosh, Alex, that the thing to unlearn is that hiring that one brilliant person or hiring that one 10x engineer is going to get you where you want to go.
Mm.
The one person is not going to do it. What can do it is teamwork and being able to fail in front of each other and not be judged, being able to take risks together. And if it doesn't pan out, not to have a finger pointed back at you. That is what it takes for a system that you are building to survive contact with the real world. I don't think a 10x engineer who blows out more code than anybody else is going to be the solving problem. It really has to do with the teamwork that you are building and the ability for them to ship well together.
That seems like a management 101 thing that a lot of places forget, that sometimes a unicorn might come in and fix things. I'm not going to deny that does happen sometimes. Sometimes you just need someone to give you the right answer and voila. But especially when things go wrong, I'm not going to be able to connect with that person because I don't know how they work. We haven't worked together much. So when the chaos hits the fan, you can't really rely on that person. But when you and your coworkers and your teammates are on the same page, you can weather that storm. And that sounds kind of corny, but there's a reason why effective managers will encourage teamwork, cooperation, things like that, because you can fly together and work better together when things do go wrong.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds corny, but I guarantee you that every listener right now can think of that one engineer, that one 10x person, that one hire they thought that was going to solve it all. And it just doesn't work that way. We run into it all the time in this industry, and it kind of makes me chuckle that we keep learning that same 101 lesson over and over and over.
It seems like that definitely happens in engineering because that unicorn who steps in isn't going to be able to be hands-on with you when you have an issue with your code, but your coworker on your same level probably can, or at least can help you figure it out together.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about mistakes and things along those lines. And on the side, you advise startups and enterprises on how to deploy AI meaningfully instead of theatrically. So, what is one misconception you often see founders and CTOs make about AI adoption? And how does your embrace the chaos model help them make smarter and better decisions?
Yeah. So starting from the back there, the embrace the chaos model, the ETC framework, if we have to be formal. I mean, that just it encourages testing, experimentation, failure. It encourages your people to be able to handle those scenarios and build together, build resilience. So that's really what we're pointing towards. And in the era when things are constantly changing, you're not going to pick up a solution and it be the forever. You need to be ready for your stack to continue to evolve, try new things, things like that. That's really what we're going for when you're thinking about how do you teach people to embrace the chaos. And for the first bit of what you were asking, the common misconceptions. Now, I also want to give some context. Trying to help I'm trying to help founders and CTOs who are outside of the AI industry, or they personally would label themselves outside the AI industry. And so I think that the common misconception that exists even one layer outside AI practitioners is that level believes that AI only is for generating text. That's it. Like, it's like, well, how do I use this LLM to help me do creative writing or creative text generation? And I think it's just more of the adoption wave and where we are at this very moment of us recording this podcast, that is their current misconception. But I think it's really fun to be able to help people see how much you can really do with AI. And I'm sure there's a lot of practitioners listening who are like, oh my God, we are so far beyond generating text. And I'm like, yes, when you are AI practitioners talking to other AI practitioners, we can go as deep as you want. But the rest of the world that is watching our wave happen, they're still trying to understand, and they're still on the wave that all you're doing is generating a slop of text. So I think that's something that it's a lot of opportunity for teaching that people like me are loving to do. But yeah, that's my most common misconception. And I personally think it's a lot harder to encourage that group of people to embrace the chaos than it is to convince them that AI can do more than generate text. But those two conversations often go hand in hand for me.
You had mentioned previously a couple of examples of how graph context can drive enterprise valuation, such as with Netflix and Wiz. So when you're talking to these teams, what are the earliest signs that an organization is even ready to build a unified graph layer? And what are the signs that they are only headed toward an expensive failure?
So they are most likely going to be headed towards an expensive failure if they aren't even comfortable, like, debating definitions with each other, or like yielding to domain experts. And honestly, I think it's more that they're likely to be headed to failure if they don't have one metric that is tied to the business, or like a business revenue, anything that's going to drive a higher ROI for the project. If your project doesn't have that one metric that's going to drive ROI for the company in a full closed loop fashion, be able to report on your initiative all the way through, close the loop on how that metric gets reported. If you're not thinking about that, it's going to fail. And it's going to fail because in a few years, your executive is going to have is going to look at the P&L and see this massive expense that has no return, and it's going to get scrapped. And if I could prevent anyone listening right now from one thing, it's your project having to be dismantled. That moment for me, by the way, in my career was the hardest. December 12th, 2019. I will always never forget what it was like to be a part of a layoff where I had to do the layoff because of a team not showing ROI for the product. And it's really difficult. And I think people get really excited when you're building new engineering about how much you can build, because you see in that moment how many cool things you could solve. But it's so much more important to focus on one thing, close the loop of the metric that is going to drive ROI for the business, and make sure you get that done and get it done well. Now, you're ready to go about this. By the way, if you do want to go after building a unified graph architecture, or having like a semantic layer that translates your business down to your data. You are ready to go about that if your team is comfortable debating with each other and quickly coming to consensus that is going to be with the domain expert, not the engineer, and moving forward and like not letting it be a thing. Like, okay, it was hard, but like we're going to move on. If you can have a team that debates the definition of a customer and be able to make a decision that day, you're going to be ready to work with it. If you all are going to like rabbit hole on that for weeks at a time, there's no way you're going to get anywhere with graph technology, because it's just, you all will never get past definitions and how to connect your data together. And you all are just going to be in a world of hurt from having yelled at each other.
So start with a measurable goal and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. A measurable goal and go from there, and make sure that you're willing to debate with each other and come to a common ground.
Well, my last question for you is this, and that is, you have a very accomplished career already. So how can our listeners engage with you?
Yeah. So I am going to be moving all of my writing to a Substack, denisegosnell.ai. And then I also have LinkedIn and Instagram, all Denise Gosnell, .ai on Instagram. And those are going to be the best places to find me and see what I'm writing about. And I am best fit for teams who appreciate no filter advice, teams who are going to be open to, I guess, I'm trying to think where I was going to go. Yeah. So I'm best fit for teams who appreciate no filter advice, and honestly, teams who have maybe been waiting to get into AI and they haven't yet, and they want a teacher or a guide, maybe not a new tool subscription. That's going to be the best place for me to join.
Wonderful. I will be sure to link to all those resources. So, Denise, thank you. Do you have any closing comments before we say goodbye?
Yeah, Alex, I just want to thank you and the ODSC AI team for bringing me on and welcome me back into the community. It had been, I think, almost 1.5 or 2 years since I had been out doing community work due to an injury. So I'm really glad to be back and very grateful to be sharing our messages. And if anyone takes any one thing away from this podcast, I would see to just remember that not everybody knows everything.
That is a great way to close this. We are always happy to feature you on our podcast, blog, at our conferences, and we are very excited to see you again in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you, Denise. Bye now. This episode is sponsored by ODSC AI East, the premier AI Builders Conference coming up this April 20th to 30th, 2026 in Boston and virtually. Learn more at odsc.ai/east, and don't forget to use the code podcast for an exclusive 10% discount. Supporting our podcast by subscribing not only helps our small dedicated team at ODSC AI, but also unlocks exclusive benefits for you. Your engagement directly contributes to the growth and success of our community. Please subscribe now and don't miss out on the next enlightening episode.